Hello, everyone. Welcome, artists. Welcome, all those alike, to the Art Lounge Alley. This is Figure Drawing Basics, part 105. I am your host, and here is where I left off yesterday. More hands. In fact, it's going to be pretty much hands for the rest of this week. There's going to be some new lessons, some new pointers that I'm going to be giving you guys. I'm going to go over real quick what you're looking at right now. So this is basically just using the block form to construct the hands, or to really have a better understanding of the structure of the hand. It's really useful for shortening. If the hand is in perspective, it's great for shading as well. You could imagine, because of these block forms, because you could clearly see all the planes on here, this being a plane, this being a plane as well, this part is a plane as well. It allows you to see how shadows would form, where shadows would, where highlights would be, and where shadows would form around it. If you got the light source that's coming from the side, you know that this area is going to receive a lot of light. Whereas this part right here, depending on how close the light source is, right? If it's very close, let's say if it's like a flashlight and the hand is in the dark, it's going to be limited to just like this area right here, depending on how close it is. The further away it is, the more light is going to be hitting the surface area of the hand. So, the most amount would be here. This is where your highlights would be, and then shadows would start to form slowly in this area. Since this finger is also kind of around the same line as this thumb right here, some of the highlights would be forming on this part, whereas shadows would be forming on this area. So this block form really allows you to kind of construct shading and lighting as well. But it has multiple uses. As I mentioned, it's very good for shortening as well. So if the hand is in perspective, you could depend on the block form and quickly draw it out. Let's say it's at an angle like so. Drawing through it to establish where the divisions for the fingers are going to be. And then building from there. In the same manner, it's all building blocks. So I'm just doing a quick demonstration to show you guys how useful it could be for shortening. Now, it could get intimidating, when you have so many different lines forming, right? You don't really know, or your eye just kind of gets confused by all the different lines that are on a page. But I think the more you practice it, the easier it becomes for you to be able to distinguish those lines. Your focus is more precise. Because of that, because you've been doing it over and over and over again. So don't let it intimidate you out of practicing it. It becomes very useful for not just hands, but it could be great for using it for the head as well. The head in perspective, which I will show you in just a few minutes. Just wanted to give you guys this quick rundown, basically. And then from there, once you start establishing it, you could start shaping things more to look more natural. Whoops. Pressed a little too hard. So once you get to the stage where it's built up three-dimensionally, you've figured out like where the positioning of the fingers are in the entire pose, let's say, of the hand. From there, you could start curving things to give it more of a natural look. And you will see how that kind of transforms the image. It makes things look more natural. So like areas where you created divisions for the fingers, areas where there would be joints. So instead of having like really hard edges around it or corners around it, you'd start to curve them. And before you know it, you have a more realistic hand. So just kind of took you guys through that quick process, something I did from imagination. Now, it looks a little bit confusing because I pressed so hard in order for you guys to actually see like what the box form is going to look like. But now you could actually start erasing, or you could just leave slightly like that box form in the background in order for you to be able to remember like, okay, where do I form shadows? Or just have it there as like a guide once you start laying in the highlights, the shadows, etc. So from step 1 all the way to step 4, you guys saw how useful it becomes to have like that that box form, that approach, that method to help you construct the hand in perspective if it's not directly facing the camera. So I'm going to show you how useful it becomes as well when it comes to the head. Here is this repeating example here, as you could see, using the box form. It is the most simple way that you could start out having your drawing. You could determine, okay, what kind of perspective do I want it to have? Do I want it to be a 2-point perspective where it's at a 3/4 angle? Or do I want it to be from the top, from top down, or from the bottom up? You know, all that you could construct using the box. And then from there, as you could see, like, let's say you choose to have this sort of diagram, right, or this sort of perspective. From there, you could just follow the same approach here. As you could see, this part would be the front of the face, this part would be the side. And you kind of could fit it into within the box. Remember, again, the important point is to draw lightly, in which case it will allow you to erase things, or you could see like these guides in the background as you're like developing more and more of the drawing. So just doing a quick construction here. For the eyebrows, the eyes. As you can see here, they're pretty much on the front of this building, let's just say, and then the side is where you would have the ear, which follows the same parallel lines. Like if you could see here, that line follows this line follows the one above it, and they're all parallel to each other. So in this case, I'm gonna have the eyebrow line here, and it's gonna follow going across on the side as well, which gives you a guideline for where you could either start or stop the point of the ear. So from here, you could just start constructing things more and more. So multiple advantages of adapting, or rather adopting this approach, this method. It becomes useful for when you're even drawing cars. You could start out with the box, and depending on the sort of perspective that you want to give the car as well. So it really helps with that because, again, you're starting out with a very basic shape. You're not going into detail. You're not working out the parameters using really complex lines or features or anything like that. It is at its most basic form. It's a box shape. So as you can see, understanding how to draw basic shapes, whether it's the cylinder, the circle, or the cube, is absolutely essential for your even intermediate stage of drawing. And you could see how it starts to really help and become like a reliable guide. But if you draw those shapes wrong, if you don't understand how to draw those shapes in perspective, let's just say how to shade them, that sort of thing, it becomes problematic, because then even the guide that you're depending on is something that you're wrestling with, you're still trying to figure out. So it's really important to practice that. If you're a beginner, something that I mention very frequently, carrying around a small drawing pad, like some sort of sketchbook that you could fit into your pocket, fit it into your book bag, something light like this. Now, pay attention to the quality of paper. That's really important. You don't want something flimsy. You don't want something that has really light paper, because again, you're carrying it around. You're going to be taking it out and putting it back in. It's going to get tattered after a while. So make sure you pick something that has some thickness to it. And that's really challenging, because sometimes the paper, like today, for example, I went and I actually got myself 2 sketchbooks. It was a good deal. It was like a clearance deal, I guess. They were selling 2 sketchbooks for the price of one, $10. Great investment. But it took me some time to pick one out, because I was thinking, okay, it has to be thick, but I don't want the texture to be really thick or heavy, because if it's really heavy texture, let's say if you shade, your lines look very jaggedy. There's like a certain roughness to your lines. There's spacing in between because of the texture on the paper. So it's kind of like driving on a bumpy road, the way that your pencil marks the paper. It's like this gritty sort of feel to it. So watch out for that. Thick paper doesn't always mean good quality paper, or the kind of paper that you're looking for, because sometimes that sort of heavy texture is very good if you're looking to have that sort of aesthetic, right? Or if you're, let's say, working with wet mediums, sometimes that isn't even that important. You're using a brush, so that texture isn't as vital. But feel it out, and I encourage you guys, and this is what I actually did, bring your pencil, the one that you use very often, and just draw on the back of the sketchbook that you're thinking about getting, and see how it feels. Draw on several of them, just like lightly sketch, so obviously it could be erased. If anybody complains, it's like, what are you complaining about? You could just easily erase these pencil marks. So yeah, just play around with it somewhere in the back of it, see how you like it. and just see how you like the other sketchbooks as well. Like, just compare a little bit, spend some time, and pick one that really feels right. But anyways, just carry it around with you, pull it out whenever you have free time, whether if you're like, say, you're on a bus or whatever, public transportation, you're sitting and waiting somewhere, or you have an appointment, you could just pull it out and draw inside of it. Practice these basic shapes, practice shading, very mindless, very easy kind of exercises that you can use. And you could see how practicing the cylinder shape ends up being very useful when you're constructing the figure in its most basic form. Pretty much everything is comprised of the cylinder shape, and you become faster at sketching because okay, well, these parts are predominantly cylinder shapes, so I don't even have to wonder what to draw or like sketch out to a point where eventually it's going to start to form or look like an arm or look like a hand. You just immediately go to these basic shapes to construct it. So very useful. It gives you opportunities to just practice really easy basic exercises. So yeah, you could see on this face there are multiple planes here. Something else that I actually wanted to show you guys, I ended up adding some eyes to this guy finally. Spent some time over the weekend playing around with that, defining certain features as well. It was a blast to do it. But here I can show you guys examples of more planes. Like, as you could see on the side here, that's one plane. Same thing on the side over here. There's a plane here. There's a plane going towards the front of the face, the sides of the face, the back of the face, the back of the head, rather. And I highly encourage you guys to try to venture into this. It could be intimidating, but it's also a great learning process. This is a method of trying to improve your craft, trying to improve your drawing skills, and it's a great way to go about it. You really have a three-dimensional understanding, and that memory, you playing around with it and getting a better grasp of all these features translates into your paper as well. When you're sketching, when you're drawing, you could kind of remember the process of what it was like sculpting the head and the face. You're definitely going to struggle with certain things. Some things are going to look off. It's going to look a little bit weird. You're going to go on YouTube and look up ways to like sculpt it better. And through that process, through all that labor, you're going to get a better grasp of like, what do I need to do? Like, what do I have to look out for? And it's going to lend itself to drawing as well. For those of you who've been following the special stream, I've been talking about Gil Elvgren, his influences. He's one of my favorite artists. If you guys haven't seen it yet, you can always check out the previous streams by heading over to the video section in Twitch and filtering in based on collection. And there you'll see like folders opening up. There's a highlights folder that has all the special streams there. You can catch up on all the Gil Elvgren episodes. But there I also talk about how Gil Elvgren, one of the best pinup artists, amazing artist, beautiful work, also used other mediums in order to achieve better results with the medium of his choice, which is painting. He was an impeccable oil painter. But he used photography in order to get the right models, the right poses, and just kind of work off of it. And he did do a lot of his own stuff. It was his own style that was added to the photograph. Like, he wasn't just hyper realistically copying the photo. He used it as a way to guide him into making sure that the poses were well, the emotion and the body language as well, all that stuff, in order to make his paintings better. So you don't have to become a photographer if you're using photography to help your painting. You don't have to become a sculptor to improve your drawing. This is all they're just tools in order to improve and get really good results. So I encourage you guys to play around with it. Clay isn't that expensive. I'm gonna say it's like probably $15. Well worth it, and it gives you an opportunity to really explore something else, a different kind of medium. so enough of that review, right? We've talked about that plenty. Let's get back to drawing hands. Okay, so the goal is to finish up the page as much as possible, fill in all the space. So we're going to be doing another hand drawing here. Speaking of cars, this is an old sketchbook, everybody. So this is stuff that is probably like, I'm going to say 5 or 6 years old, if not older than that. So I'm just revisiting it. It also got me more and more familiar with the kind of paper that I like, because I don't like this paper. It's very thin. You could see through to the other side. Like, I did some inking, and it wasn't even like, I wasn't even using a brush with ink, you know, to like ink the stuff. It was like Micron, and using a Micron, you could see like the drawing seep through the paper. So that really sucks. I really don't like it. And this answers my question, like why I abandoned the sketchbook. And I have so many like empty pages or unfinished pages. It's because it's just too light for my liking. Alright, so just like I started out all the other ones, I'm gonna do a quick gesture. Of the hand. And try to grasp like the general shape of it. You know, not going into any sort of detail at all whatsoever. Kind of borrowing elements of the cylinder shape to form the fingers. Kind of like even melding fingers together for a more of a general shape. You want to like draw as much of a simplified version of the entire let's say gesture of the hand or the body or the face or whatever before you start laying on the bricks or, you know, going into detail. Basically that's what laying on the bricks would be as a metaphor for like building a building, as in comparison to drawing. You know, the bricks are the detail in your drawing. What you would spend time trying to polish to make the drawing look even more believable. Okay, so we got the general shape. I'm sketching lightly so that in case I do recognize like I need to like shift things a little bit more towards the left, for example, as you see here, or the right, you know, depending. So that it won't be too late. You know, I'm not going to press too hard for that reason. Now I'm giving the fingers a little bit more detail, separating them into individualistic ones. And it's like a layering process. I guess that's what drawing and painting have in common. It is a layering process for both. You know, until the point where you are extremely professional. You know, you've been drawing for so long that it's no longer a question of understanding anatomy or understanding these features of the body or the human figure. You just kind of understand it completely. The same way as, like, there's certain words you don't have to think about, right? You don't have to think of about the word and, A-N-D, like, you know it, you know, all those simple words, you don't have to go and define it and look in a dictionary and pronounce it to get it right. Like, you just know it. But when you were first learning that in the very first few stages, it was slightly confusing. You had to rely more on definitions and explanations in order to use it properly, right? Until eventually you just don't think about it anymore. You use it very efficiently. So the same thing happens with your drawings. You just become so good at understanding, or you understood the features so well that it just comes to you naturally. You don't have to struggle with it. You don't have to fight it. It just looks right. So I wanted to also talk about today the idea of motivation. Like, where do you get inspiration from? Where do you get motivation to sit down and practice every day? This can be very challenging for people who are learning. They're at the very beginning stages of learning because you're not getting the good results, and you're seeing all these other illustrators and they're doing such amazing work, and then you look at yours and you're just like, oh, it's not there. The answer to it is you just have to remember that, as I mentioned earlier, it's a process. It really takes some time for you to be able to do it. And each day you're getting closer and closer to it. Don't rush it. Don't try to do it at the same pace as they do it. Take your time. Remember the really important things. I think a lot of the motivation comes from just looking at other people's work and just remembering that eventually you'll get there as well with dedication and practice, and just remembering how fun it is to just do it, despite not getting the best results. Like, I look at my work and I know that I'm still ways away from achieving goals that I set myself, but that doesn't dishearten me. That doesn't make me think like, oh well, maybe it's not worth it, I'm not there. It's actually more motivating to think like, okay, eventually, with the same amount of dedication and practice, I'm definitely going to get there. And also not giving into those thoughts, like not giving into the thoughts of, it might be hopeless, or I'm not getting there quick enough, or whatever else. Like, not even giving it the time of day, basically. And that's a skill to learn, because it really helps with procrastination. It's one of the worst things that you could do for drawing, or for anything, really, anything that you're trying to learn. So if you learn this skill of just not giving into certain things, thinking of things that you need to do just the same way as you would when it comes to brushing your teeth. Like, you wake up every day, you have to brush your teeth. You don't think about it. You're not like, well, am I in the mood for it? Should I do it? Maybe I'll, you just kind of go and do it, So there's certain things that we know we have to do that are essential, that are going to be beneficial in the long run. That's going to cause a lot of issues if we don't. And we just do it. We don't spend time out of our day thinking about whether we should approach that or not. So just think of certain things that you have to do, like this, for example, sitting down and drawing, as that, And what you have to continuously remember is that once you do, if you really truly do enjoy drawing, once you sit down and do it, you're gonna get into it. You're really gonna start enjoying it, and it's not gonna be this thing where you feel like, oh, it's some sort of duty, or that it's some sort of necessary task where I'm just begrudgingly gonna do. It becomes enjoyable. You just have to get over the initial hump, that point where your brain is just trying to just chill. It just doesn't want to do much. It just wants to be, and I think part of it has to do with something that we carry on from childhood, something that we carry on as being kids. Like, when we were kids, we didn't have any sort of responsibilities. We didn't have any sort of things that we had to do as much. Like, everything was kind of guided for us. Parents would force you to do certain things, and you would just do it begrudgingly because they told you, and you never really had to do it yourself. So and we had this like unlimited amount of energy to want to go and do things and play and just have a good time all the time. It was just a really enjoyable time. And as we get older, we have to part with that a little bit, and I think some people have a hard time parting with that. They end up procrastinating by like doing other things and doing things that are enjoyable rather than things that help build our fulfilling desires. This is something that would be absolutely amazing. This is why when we look at comics or movies or whatever it is, animated series, we're just like, we're glued to the TV, or glued to the book, because it is something really cool, some ability that we could teach ourselves. So there is a part that really wants to learn that, and that is like our adult side, our side that really wants to acquire these skills. But like the side of us that's still remnants of our childhood or remnants of like kid behavior, kid mentality are still present, and we kind of have to work that out, because eventually the skill that we learn or whatever it is that we're aspiring to achieve becomes that same level of entertainment. It's just leveling up your entertainment, what you enjoy doing, rather than it being mindless, or rather than it being something that doesn't get you anywhere. You end up developing this amazing skill, whether it's playing music or whether it's drawing, and you're able to like create all these different things that come to your imagination. So you're not abandoning completely this aspect of what you enjoyed as a kid. You're just morphing it to being more mature. You're morphing it to be more engaging and interesting for yourself, and healthy in a lot of ways. So there's that part of us, that kid side of us, that does not want to understand that. It wants to keep things very simple, and we have to learn to fight that off. We have to remember every time that happens that that's the kid side of us that's talking, that's trying to make decisions, and we can't let that guide us. We want to learn a skill. We want to learn the ability to draw. We want to learn the ability, let's say, to play music or write a novel, or whatever it is, whatever your choices, or create a song or dance, all those things. Those are things that require more studious and a lot of attention, like studious attention and focused attention to create. And that's not something that we were used to as kids. That was something that we had to be conditioned in order to awaken to that and realize like we're capable of doing those things. So I think it's important, just going back to the idea of like motivation, to remind ourselves that that is going to interfere very frequently until this other side of us takes over. It being that state of mind being present so often, and us like going along with it so often that it becomes our default more than that other side of us, that bratty side. I'm gonna say it's a bratty side of our personality, or of our development. I'm gonna say, that when kids are like stomping around and they're tired and they don't want to go to bed, but they are exhausted in a way. So it's this like, again, it's this like contradicting self-interest where you want to continue to play, right? But your body is just like exhausted, and sometimes these kids just like pass out, just sleeps on the floor or something because they're just exhausted eventually. So yeah, it's just recognizing that is something that's present, and that is that side of us that refuses to like do things that are more complicated, more challenging. I think that's also another reason why sometimes kids throw temper tantrums, because they recognize like, well, it's not fun, it's more difficult, and I really have to focus. And they say, I don't want to do it. Or it's like a little intimidating, and they're like, I don't want to do it. So we have to recognize that that doesn't go away on its own. It's not something that like one day you wake up and you're like, I don't want to procrastinate anymore. I guess I grew up, like overnight my brain just developed to be a lot better. It's something that we have to train ourselves to do. So, just going back to the idea of like, where do you get the motivation from? It's just self-discipline. You just have to psychologically talk to yourself and say like, well, I really want to learn this and I want to get better at it, so I'm going to do it no matter what. Even if I don't feel like doing it right now, I'm going to sit and do it. You have to have that self-conversation with you in order to train yourself to do what's necessary, and recognize like that other side is going to come back and it's going to tell me like not to, or to do something else, and I can't give into that. That's me giving into the bratty side of me, the child side of me, and I want to develop. I want to get better. I want to learn this skill that allows me to create all these awesome comics and animations and stories. So I'm gonna sit down, I'm gonna spend the time and focus on this stuff and really give it my all and get better and better as much as possible, and just continuing to do that every day. Just having that self-conversation with yourself, disciplining yourself to do it. And it's a very useful skill to acquire. I think eventually it carries over to a lot of other things that we need to do to be more structured throughout the day, to be able to achieve things that we know is going to make our lives a lot easier. So that question, sometimes motivation is very easy. Sometimes you watch some movie, or you look at some sort of comic book and it just really hits you and you're like, oh, this is so inspiring. This is so great. I want to sit down and try to push myself to get to that point. You'll have those, and people sometimes depend on that, or their understanding of, wanting to draw or do something creative is, oh, it's always coming from that place, that like inspired awe and burst of energy to want to do it. That's what most people think of when it comes to motivation, but it really isn't always the case. Like sometimes it just happens from you having to kickstart yourself, basically. You just have to literally tell yourself, sit down and do it. And then once you do, it starts to pour in. So it's important to work through that. I don't wanna, period. And just get with it. Just do it. And at the end of the day, this is something that I like to do as well, is just kind of recap at the end of the day. Whether you're in the shower, whether you're, laying in bed right before you go to sleep, you just kind of think back to like, what have I accomplished today? What did I do today? And you could remind yourself like, yeah, there was a point where I wasn't motivated, but I sat down and I did it anyways. And I got this, and this done. And that really helps build your confidence as well. Not an excuse for you to do the opposite the next day, but just to say like, hey, I could push myself past insecurities, or past my bratty side, past my like child side, and I can get myself to do things that need to be done that are really important. That's an accomplishment. That's a great goal. It's a great achievement for the day. So, and it's helpful to recognize that. It's something to next day wake up and keep the ball rolling. Just reminding yourself that. Well, I did that yesterday, even though I don't feel like it again today. I did that yesterday, and at the end of the day, I was really proud of my accomplishment. I was able to again push myself past that. So I'm going to do that again today, and just keep that going, keep that momentum going. Which also brings the idea of burning out. You don't want to push yourself to a point where, let's say, you're just really exhausted or something, or you spend so many hours you're just completely burnt out from the activity or whatever it was that you were doing. So that's why it's kind of important to pace things out. Start out with doing it an hour every day, and then challenge yourself to do it 2 hours, 3 hours, etc. And just continue to build on it until you're ready to take it to the next level. Spend some time doing it 2 to 3 hours a day, then try to take yourself to the next level. You're comfortable already with 2 to 3 hours, and there comes a point where you're just like, I want to push myself past this. Like, I really feel I feel great about what I accomplished. I want to be able to take it to the next level. And that switch becomes more natural rather than this like very specific process, right? All right, more holding glass examples. So I'm going to move on to, well, let me just do this one actually before I move on to the next one, which is going to be holding a brush. So here I'm utilizing this block form to start creating shadows. Man, before you know it, the stream is almost over. I honestly thought that I had more time here. So it looks like it's going to be just like me finishing up the shading for this drawing. And I'm going to have to call it a night for figure drawing basics. I'm going to take a 5-minute break, and then I'm going to be back for the project stream. It's a digital painting that I'm doing right now. It's also me revisiting an old study of Jacques-Louis David. He's a French painter, one of my favorite painters actually, and he does immaculate work, like incredible level of detail, very cool theme. It's a theme of a philosopher that I really like. It's the Death of Socrates. That's the painting. And you guys are going to see it. I'm going to show you the original. I'm going to show you guys my progress currently and continue to work on that. Now, at some point, it might actually just transition into something I'm working on from my imagination. something that I'm actually trying to develop off stream. Like on my own time, I'm just kind of sitting down and trying to make it out to be how I want it to. It's at the very beginning stages of it as well. So I might show you guys at some point in the future the progress of that on stream. But for today, you guys are going to see this beautiful study of Jacques-Louis David's painting. Just gonna round off corners here. Oh, and before I go, actually, I wanted to remind you guys that this week we're going to have another special intro. It's not going to be Gil Elvgren, although I am going to continue that, absolutely. I'm excited to show you guys new artists in that stream. But it's going to be a little concert. It's something that I found recently, and I really liked it. I thought it was very cool. It's instrumental. It's going to be... it's not going to be long. It's going to be 15 minutes. So I'm going to say a quarter of the stream. So look out for that. That's coming up. It's going to be this Friday. And then next week, I'm going to continue on with Gil Elvgren. So part 6 of Gil Elvgren, the special intro, is going to be next week. Make sure you keep an eye out for announcements. Visit my other social media platform where I regularly post times that I'm going to be going live to give you guys an idea, and also giving you like a little sneak peek of what the special intro is going to be right before I start streaming. That's what I'm using currently. All the social media for now is just to promote the Twitch channel, to promote the stream. Alright everybody, that pretty much does it for today for Figure Drawing Basics. If you guys enjoyed this content, if you found it to be helpful, remember to hit that like and subscribe button. And also, feel free to post any questions, or leave any comments, leave some thoughts and ideas, like what are some of the things that you're going through? What are some things that end up being challenging for you, let's say when it comes to motivation? Share your experiences, and I could talk about that as well on the stream. I could give my perspective on it. I can help you guys maybe figure out a way out of that. So I'm looking forward to hearing from you guys. Make sure to leave those comments in chat, or send them in social media, and I'll talk about it on stream. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. I'll be back in 5 minutes for the project stream. Welcome back, everybody, and welcome newcomers to the Art Lounge Alley. This is Project Part 72, and here is where I left off. That is Jacques-Louis David's painting. It's The Death of Socrates. It's one of my favorite paintings. Absolutely love everything about it. I mean, the story behind it is great. It's about this philosopher named Socrates back in ancient Greek times. And here you could see Socrates in the middle on the bed, and Plato, who's sitting by his bedside all the way on the left side, just contemplating the scenario. And what you're seeing here is Socrates about to accept this cup that's filled with hemlock, a poison. And how it came to be to this scenario is he's well known for questioning pretty much everything, questioning and trying to arrive at truth through questioning pretty much anything and everything. And he spent a lot of his times even challenging people who called themselves to be incredibly wise and knowledgeable and superior, whatever it is. And basically just running circles around them with all forms of questions and ideas, concepts that are controversial, that are, thought-provoking, that are kind of shake the grounds of all these people who found themselves to be incredibly stable in their pursuits. So that's where originally, like, the Socratic method comes from. It's this constant questioning of things, and it wasn't favored by a lot of people at that time. It was actually, it angered a lot of people who were well established, who were rich, who called themselves superior to others, etc. Politicians hated it, put them in a place where they didn't feel comfortable, which is this uncertainty, this level of uncertainty. But through that process, Socrates would find the truth of the matter of whatever it is, whether it's revealing to the public that these politicians are full of shit, basically. They don't know what they're talking about, or that they're trying to convince people of something that they have absolutely no proficiency in, that they're liars. So that really pissed off a lot of people. It pissed off a lot of politicians and government officials of the time, and they told them, you gotta stop doing this. So either you stop doing it, or we're going to sentence you to death. So it's your choice. And Socrates basically says, well, go fuck yourself. I'm not going to stop questioning things. I'm not going to stop questioning reality, because that is fundamentally the purpose of my existence, is to find the truth in pretty much anything, understand it fully by continuously exploring all sorts of avenues and all sorts of directions, and trying to get to the core of things. And through this process, you could even, thank the development of science, thank the development of technology. It is because of this constant questioning of we've arrived at this, but what can we do with that? Or what does this mean? And then just continuously diving deeper and deeper and deeper to try to reveal more and more. So imagine what the world would be like if that wasn't the case. If it wasn't for somebody like this, who chose death over, not questioning things and just living this kind of limited existence that he knows, if he was to uncover more and more, might be even more and more interesting, might reveal even more and more interesting things. So it was an amazing act of dedication to his cause, dedication to his pursuit, and understanding the vital importance of such a thing. The idea of questioning reality, the idea of questioning those in authority, and questioning those who call themselves to be incredibly knowledgeable. And as I mentioned, you could reveal that a lot of people are full of shit because of that. You question them long enough and you recognize you don't really know what you're talking about. Not to say that there aren't people there that are very well educated, but those who are know that there is a certain amount of limit for their knowledge, and that it's okay to say, I don't know. there are points where you do have to just recognize that, and instead of being delusional and crazy and pretending that you do know what the truth is or what the matter at hand is, when the real answer is you don't. But anyways, so this is a painting of that moment where Socrates basically just says, if I'm living a life that I can't question, it's a life worth not living. And he accepts this cup of hemlock, and all of his friends and followers and those who really admired and loved and looked up to him are just grieved by that. You could tell by their body language and face expressions and such, and Plato just being incredibly sad by this idea, because they were closely related. They were friends. Though there is some controversy out there saying that Socrates didn't exist, and it's actually a manifestation of Plato and his theories on a lot of things. But who knows? The important thing is that there is this idea out, this concept out about questioning reality, and there's some interesting books out there to read about all that. Interesting books to read about Socrates and his philosophy and his experiences and what he contributed to history. It's absolutely fascinating. But anyways, I wanted to not only paint this for that reason, but I also really like Jacques-Louis David's style of painting. Like, it's very beautiful, very well the colors are very well selected, and how he paints is incredible. So here you guys could see some of my progress, and I started out the same way as pretty much most of my drawings. If you guys have been following along, I started out with just creating parameters, using these like big shapes, generalized shapes, basically more simplified shapes, to play as placeholders in the painting, to make sure that, okay, well, from here I could start building out the rest. So I start out with, let's say, this little stone slab, right? And I just measure out, well, how far away is it from like the frame of the original painting? And then from that measurement, in its most simple form, I could start building the foot. The foot is this amount, on this step, and then little by little, in relation to one thing and to another, I construct like the entire drawing. But in the beginning, it's pretty helpful. It's a very free-flowing state. You're not really bound to any sort of detail or anything, so you could just quickly create these general large shapes in order to like start from somewhere. So I'm going to continue on. I was working on Plato last time, and I kind of want to continue on from that as well. I'm utilizing the paintbrush from Clip Studio Paint. Which isn't something I really explored. I haven't really tapped into that until recently. It's an actual oil brush. It says thick oil brush. There's just so much going on over there. Whoa. Having to capture the likeness is one. Using the right colors, mixing all sorts of colors, because it's not just solid colors here. There's like so much going on there. Knowing how to blend them. And the dropper tool isn't always reliable because the droplet tool is sampling a pixel. So like I'm clicking on a pixel, and as you can see, there's like so many different colors in just like one area that it's kind of hard to tell if like the pixel it picks up is actually that entire that color set. So what I'm basically getting at is that there is no real shortcuts here. You really do have to just spend a lot of time, focus, and dedication to get it right. It's one of the reasons why I also want to, I'm not planning on doing too many streams with this. There's a lot to do here. You know, there's a lot to cover, a lot to focus on. And I would like to start developing more and more of my work from imagination. As you guys saw from the previous stream, or the previous project rather. I enjoy that process, but I also really like painting. You know, it's a different vibe, it's a different feeling as opposed to a drawing. And Clip Studio Paint actually does a really, like, the more I'm doing it, the more I'm amazed at how well it's able to replicate the pastiness of the brush strokes, because it's not only just putting creating the color that I selected, it's also sampling the colors around. So if it's like a little bit of well, it's not really sampling it, but it's kind of like, yeah, it's actually there depending on how hard you press. Like, as you could see, like right now I have gray selected, but because I'm pressing lightly on this area, it's actually sampling some of that brown onto the gray. And the more I press down on it, the thicker that the gray gets. The lighter I press down on it, the more it spreads the color that I'm working on. So you could see like the brown is kind of spreading onto the gray here. So it's pretty good, you know, it's a really good emulation of it, and it's a lot faster of a process, I'll say that, you know, from the times I do remember painting with oils. It's a very laborious task. There are no shortcuts really. It's just getting more, it's getting better with the technique. It's getting better at mixing colors, you know, so there are certain things you could learn to get better, but it's not like you could control Z your way out of an error. You know, you really have to know what you're doing, and that comes with practice. And I'll also note that it requires materials, a lot of materials. You know, you need a painting medium like linseed oil to like dip your brush in, dip the colors in order for them to like glide on the canvas more. You need turpentine or something like it, like mineral spirits, to clean brushes, to clean certain areas, and even dilute your colors as well, which is sometimes used in paintings. And having to understand each of those materials, you know, how to use them properly, along with how to use the brush properly. So there's a lot that goes into it. And you do have to spend some money on all that equipment. But I'd say it's helpful to get familiar with it using this program, like using Clip Studio Paint, to get more familiar with it. I think it's pretty helpful approach if you want to get your feet wet, kind of. So this shadow that I'm going to be working on right now, it's kind of like a brownish yellow. And I can't really sample that. You know, it's like mixture of color. There's a little bit of orange there, a little bit of red, I'm going to say. So like all these little colors mixed in together. On a different note, actually, I ended up joining a new social media platform called Hive, which I'm really happy about. You know, I've been talking about this for a while now, how important it is for us to get different social media. Now it's really, really, like, what I hope is going to happen is that it becomes better and better, and it won't sell out. You know, like, basically that's what happened to Twitter. You know, people were just more interested in the money than what the platform really stood for, which is an opportunity for people to share ideas, educate each other, share points of views progressively, that sort of thing. And instead they chose to take lots of money which a great thing would be to do is to create another social media platform, one that is even more robust, and it prevents things like spamming or bots, something that's really problematic. Like recently there was like a Twitter poll, of course, to bring back a fascist into the social media platform after he was banned, and the polls supposedly said that they should, considering that the entire platform is like filled with bots and spam and fake accounts. People are like, oh well, the polls said, which is ridiculous. It's absolutely absurd that people are trying to take that seriously. But I'm not a huge fan of Twitter. I was never really on that platform, and I just use it now. I'm currently using it to just promote this channel. But anyways, I started to use Hive, and so far so good. I mean, it's still in its early stages, so like things like the algorithm is really shoddy. Like since it's new and not that many people are on it, or not that many people are posting on it, it's still not the best as far as like generating content or generating what is considered to be more engaging, because let's say on Instagram, since there are so many users and there are so many people who are interested in something, it rises up to the top very very fast, basically. Whereas on Hive, everything is new. All the content is absolutely new. It's just starting out, so it's just an overwhelming amount of content that hasn't been really liked or watched or anything. So all the content is on the same level, basically. And I believe it's going to take some time for that to like generate. But it's absolutely a step towards the better. I'm really thrilled about that, and I hope more social media comes out that's quality, not just any social media, because personally I don't think that Tumblr is that great. I've gone on there, and the content, and I think it has to do with like the algorithm, and plus just I don't know, it's just too vague. Perhaps I just haven't spent enough time on it. But the level of engagement, I think, is different. I think if they create social media that has very strong restrictions on bots and spam accounts and all that, I think it would be a great opportunity for things like polls, where people actually can have an honest vote on something. The question remains if like the best form of voting is just done through paper and by mail, or in person going in and voting. It's just hard to really figure out the truth of the matter, because they always can fudge things. They could always, people in power, people who have a lot of money and influence, they can always rig things and change things around if they wanted to. But I'm not a pro. I don't really know what the process is like. None of us, or not that many of us, I would say, really do know what the truth is like of what that process is like, how rigorous of safekeeping it is when it comes to like the voting systems and such. Like, I'm sure some places are honest, other places aren't. I think it really depends on the location and the reputation of the people who are handling those sort of things. But just going back to the idea of social media, if they have like certain strict policies when it comes to, let's say, creating an account, that it requires something to verify that it's you. Like, I think what they've done recently or over the past few years, which is requiring phone number, and you could only use like the one that you're assigned. Of course, there's workarounds for that as well. There's ways that people can go around that, but it's less of an opportunity for anybody to just create an account and just start spamming, harassing, or whatever else, But the more, I guess, strict those policies can be, the better. Because I think, sure, we can have social media platform that is more relaxed when it comes to that, where it's not that important. But I think we also just need social media that does require that sort of strict policies when it comes to spamming, bots, fake accounts, that sort of thing. I think just having a mix is important, because you never know when something could go south with one app, like we've seen in recent days, where at one moment it could be going well, next moment it gets bought out by somebody who's a fascist. So the more apps we have, the better, because we can easily just be like, well, now I don't want to contribute to this anymore, I'm going to move to another platform, instead of putting more profits in the pockets of people who are absolutely insane. Which also, it points out again how just having money doesn't make you an incredibly intelligent person or a person worth listening to or following. It really has to do with knowledge and morality. Like, if a person has a great amount of knowledge and they're moral, I think should have precedence over somebody who's rich and famous, because that doesn't take, it doesn't really take that much to achieve. You just have to appeal to very base instincts and cheat and lie and manipulate your way until you're able to be on top. That's basically what capitalism is. Exploit, cheat, and lie to get as much money as possible. And that's the way to get as much money as possible, which is what makes it so toxic. And the fact that more people would sign up for it is what creates like a sociopathic sort of nation, where everybody's just kind of like this cutthroat sociopath. They don't care about anything or anybody other than money and profits. And if more people die, who cares? That's a form of insanity. Absolutely. And a lot of them work on making it acceptable, making it normal, because then they get the chance to feel more and more powerful, more justified. If there are less people who are, appalled by their disgusting behavior, the better for them. So it's a very dangerous ground to walk on, and it ripples through society. And it's not just this like, oh, that's bad, morally we're taught that that's bad. It's psychologically, like what happens to us psychologically. It's really toxic. It's really damaging. If people are upset about certain things that have to do with like their job environments, for example, and they're affected by that, if they're being harassed in some sort of way, it just points to the fact that our emotions are important, and how we feel and like what our environments are like are important. So to like numb yourself out to all sorts of emotions, not to have to deal with that, isn't the workaround. It's just gonna, like I said, it's gonna breed more insanity, more crazy behavior. And it's not until people are victims of those scenarios that they start to feel as if though, things need to change. And by then, the effort to change things becomes even more and more difficult, because more and more people are starting to act that way. And the battle takes like a steeper, it creates like a steeper hill. You're battling an uphill fight, basically, and that hill is getting steeper and steeper with all the times that we've accepted more and more insane behavior and lack of empathy, lack of consideration, spite, which is what capitalism breeds. How does it do that, you might ask? Like, what are some ways? Well, for one, it's done with products as well. For example, they appeal to people's egocentric tendencies. People who haven't really recognized how important it is to work that out of your system. There's a difference between taking care of yourself and being egocentric. It's the levels of degree of extremes. And egocentric suggests somebody who really doesn't care about anything other than themselves in any sort of situation, and pretty much just makes everything about them. As opposed to somebody who cares about themselves, which is limiting the amount of toxic behavior that is being projected on them. But capitalists and people who try to make money appeal to this basic form, and they say things like, oh, well, if you want to show that you're capable, or that you are better than this person, buy this product. This product suggests that you are very rich, or that you are well off. And people eat that up. They choose that as an option when they come across somebody who is also, say, capitalist and has the same sort of behavior. So now there's another person who is caught up in that game, and they're taking the same action as that person. And that person they're competing against recognize it, and they try to one up that to suggest otherwise. And now you have two people who are playing this game, and it's getting more and more toxic. They're doing more and more things to outdo each other, while this company is profiting off of these like ego battles, basically. Now take that and multiply that by the number of people in a society, and imagine how much money is being generated based off of this idea, and how many people are acting that way and getting worse and worse as one outdoes the other. You know, they do this and then they do that. You know, that's just one example of how toxic capitalism is and how terrible people become because of those things. And that kind of highlights how capitalism is very much in line with fascism, which is basically this like authoritarian concept coupled with racism and the idea of like superior and inferior, and what that is based on, you know, what that really means to a person. Now, if somebody says that about you, you know, oh, you're inferior to me, is that something that you're going to accept, or are you going to try to prove to that person how they're that type of person instead? You know, so the way that you end up acting escalates their action against you, retaliation. So it's a sickness, it's a idea disease that takes hold of people's basic form of pride, you know, that we have for ourselves, and it exploits that. It just continues to accelerate things further and further and further. Which is also what road rage is about as well. Like, I just saw a recent video of one person ending up like chasing another person and smashing into their car over and over again. You know, there's one thing where you bump into another car, you smash into another car accidentally, or maybe intentionally, but it's another thing for the other person to come back and do it over again. And then that person, so it's just this like endless battle that just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. And the more people are exposed to that, the more they tend to like either react the same way when a similar scenario comes their way. You know, it just exacerbates things more and more. And it's based on like a lot of different things, like, oh, what do people eat, how they eat. That is so primitive, you know, and then that would cause or give people reason to act insane themselves and incredibly basic. So they would say things like, oh, this person's so basic, yet their approach of having to like kill somebody because, or having the right to like abuse them or whatever, is incredibly basic as well. You know, that is something that would be found in the animal kingdom. You know, those who aren't capable of defending themselves end up being subjugated to physical harm or possibly getting killed. So to say, oh, that's so primitive, and then act based on these very primitive principles is complete contradiction, which is a mark of crazy. It doesn't make any sense. There isn't anything justifiable about it. Yet people still see themselves to be in some way inherently better or whatever, which I really don't believe in. And I think a lot of it just has to do with like education. A lot of it has to do with your environment, what kind of an environment that you were born into. And all those things can actually be shaped towards the better. We have to completely drop this idea of inherently better than. And it's just an excuse for people who are sociopathic and they don't really care about anybody other than themselves to not have to contribute or deal with anybody, and just continuously have this self-serving sort of approach to existence. So the way that they justify it is by trying to brainwash everybody else to act that way or think like them. So less opposition and more opportunity for them to continue to behave like sociopaths. And I think it's incredibly, it's very problematic. Internationally, it's not even just in certain areas, as you could see, and that should highlight something, that it has nothing to do with nationality, and it has everything to do with the mind. So if it's happening worldwide, if people, let's say in China, are being treated poorly by their own kind of people, so if one Chinese person is treating another Chinese person awful, based on these like superior inferior concepts, it has nothing to do with nationality. It has nothing to do with that like inherent sort of thing, and everything to do with this idea disease, this way of behaving. You got a bunch of countries where people are it's not multicultural, but the same sort of problems happen there as well. They have people who are incredibly poor, people who are getting exploited as well. And the fact that there is this similarity just shows how it has nothing to do with anything other than the kind of people that are around, and how that behavior is parasitic, like it spreads from person to person. Fighting fire with fire is gonna burn the entire forest. In that example, and there are certain times where if you were to take it out of this metaphor, it would make sense, but that's just to point out exactly where the direction of that would be when it comes to people. It's just going to create more and more animosity, aggression, and eventually wars are going to be created because of those stupid approaches. I mean, take a look at what's going on in Russia. It's Russian people against Russian people. But a lot of it has to do with the egocentric side of a single person, which is appalling. Like one person is pushing everybody, or a bunch of people, to become murderers with parasitic ideas. He's not actually there flying planes, bombing them. He's just making speeches and talking to people. And those people end up going out and bombing cities, killing children, killing women, killing innocent people that have nothing to do with what they're talking about. So again, just highlights how it's just a parasitic way of thinking. Multiple nations, all different types of people, or people who are about the same when it comes to nationality, but the behavior is there. So it's not the fact that somebody is a different nationality. It's the fact that people who adopt those concepts are brats. Most of them are just bratty fucking people. Like, they don't want to respect anything other than themselves. They don't want to share anything other than with themselves. You know, the more they can have for themselves, the better. The more people they can kill off, the better for them. You know, so it's just how having this like brat mentality goes further and further unchecked until it becomes insanity. Somebody who's just continuously on that path eventually becomes a psycho. So many different types of folds here. Trying to capture these dark shadows here, and it seems like there's so many different colors there as well. It's like there's some brown, there's some yellow, there's some green. It's so complex. I think, just going back to that topic I was discussing earlier, I think a lot of these problems would be solved if we had great education systems. Like if teachers got paid really well, to become a teacher, if it was very rewarding, which I don't see a reason why they shouldn't. If a lawyer gets paid a lot and they're responsible for making sure that, people or the law is upheld and people are civilized and that they respect these things. If a doctor is paid really well in order to ensure that people are healthy or that that they're cured, all those things are important roles. This is why they're getting paid so well. Well, teachers shape the future. Literally, they shape the future of the economy. It really depends on them, how smart the students are going to be, how smart the people who are eventually going to need to work in their special interests. That really is vital. It's just as vital as a doctor who saves lives. Teachers save lives by giving them opportunity to be smarter, make better decisions, be better at the jobs that they're interested in. So it's absolutely essential. Now, of course, that doesn't serve capitalism, because if you're too smart, you're not going to fall for their stupid tricks to buy their useless products. So it's just like conflicting interest that makes politicians work against that. They're defunding schools, they're hiring just about anybody off the street because teachers aren't getting paid well. So rather than paying teachers better, they're just creating jobs for people who aren't really good at what they're doing. So if they pay teachers well, and they require a psychology degree, basically, so that they are able to understand all forms of behavior, know how to deal with them, know how to go around them. All those things are incredibly important when you're a teacher and you're experiencing all these different classes and behaviors. If basically schools are funded better, and let's say teachers are getting paid well, they also have assistants there present, it could be pretty intimidating being in a classroom full of students, let's just say, who don't come from good backgrounds, who come from really destructive families or destructive behaviors or aggressive behaviors. And it could be a lot to handle while you're trying to stay focused, while you're trying to stay knowledgeable and teach the class, So having to mitigate all of that is a lot. And I think if they have teacher assistants, like somebody who's there at all times with the teacher, helps out with the lessons, helps out with the lesson plans, like goes around and makes sure that the students are understanding the material. If somebody's a little bit behind on something, they could get that guidance there, somebody who's going to be there to explain it better to them, or just sit down and work through the problem with them. I think it would also encourage the class to behave better, because they know that it's not just them against this teacher. There's somebody else who's witnessing their behavior, and they could attest to, like, well, that's what happened here. This things got out of control, and this is what happened, and so on and so forth. And that could really help improve the class. Now, also, it's required, I think, in order to have a really successful school, is to also have very knowledgeable and professional counselors there. So if somebody, let's say, is incredibly racist, they have like racist point of views because their parents are very toxic, they could be taken into these counseling classes, and they could be spoken with professionally, done well, so that way that there is some progress, and that they know how to mitigate that in ways where the student could open up and they could talk about a lot of these issues and talk about their points of views and get somewhere, and start shaping them to be progressive, start shaping them out of the problems that they're facing, whether it's at home, because that's where they're learning a lot of this stuff, whatever their environment is, helping them out of those places as well, figuring out ways that they could possibly live in better conditions. But all that requires funding. All that requires schools and teachers to get paid well in order to pursue those careers. So if you're going to go into college trying to pursue a master's degree in psychology and master's degree as a teacher, let's just say, you're going to come out with a big debt. And if you're going to come out with a big debt going into school, getting paid poorly for all that, it doesn't become like a desirable choice to make, for the sake of just having a better life for yourself in the future, and not making it a waste of time, basically finding out like, well, I can't even pay my rent, or can't even pay off my student loans after I get out for that. So it's a conundrum, it's a big issue. And I think that's just how our taxes should be funding more schools and teachers and counselors there, and colleges that really up the ante for teacher's degree. What's required, what do you need to know? Like, every teacher should be incredibly proficient in psychology in order to be able to mitigate these kind of scenarios. So yeah, just going back to that scenario, if they have the proper counselors for it, so that kids can actually go and talk to these counselors, which means there has to be a lot of them there. If the school, thousands of students there, I'm sure it's not just like one person who's going to have these sort of things. So, the importance of teachers getting paid well, the importance of having quality teachers and quality counselors who are also getting paid well, I think can diffuse a lot of scenarios that could create a safe haven for kids who are troubled. It's in a lot of cases, it's something as little as having somebody that they could rely on to get better advice about something, to feel like they're in a safe space to discuss things. And I think that's really important in order for education to go in a progressive direction. Rather than funding sororities and fraternities and all those places that have like reputations for raping women and causing suicides for people who've been like abused and harassed and like sexually abused, all sorts of stuff, rather than funding that garbage, fund teachers, fund all these opportunities for students to go in and actually talk about this stuff, just have this like very private sort of conversations with opportunities for resources for them to get better results. But again, this kind of goes back to this capitalist idea. We got people who are fascists and who are capitalists working in these government sectors or hiring people in the government sectors that distribute money in ways that favors them, basically stuffing their pockets, not creating these opportunities because they want more stupid people. They want people who are going to be soldiers for them, to fight for their cause, when they go and they instigate things internationally. And this applies to every country, this applies to everywhere, it's not just specifically to any place, but they just have people go out there, instigate stuff, create problems, establish bases, drilling oil for profit, obviously, having soldiers go out there for the wrong reasons. They gaslight the soldiers to go out there and think that it's something else. Meanwhile, it's there to intimidate people and make them think like, well, we're going to keep... Excuse me. We're going to keep drilling oil. We're going to establish our job sources here. They're paying basically like 50 cents for somebody to make an iPhone instead of paying livable wages domestically. They're doing it internationally and then blaming, it's these lefties, they don't care and they're just not doing whatever. Meanwhile, this is what they're doing instead. And they're creating jobs internationally because it's cheaper and they get to stuff their pockets more. And it's all worked together. It's special interests, so you got politicians who are spinning these stories and creating funds for things to happen like that internationally, and in return, those corporations that are able to do that with the help of soldiers being there to make sure that things continue to operate in their favor, end up paying those politicians money from their profits. They're saying, thanks for doing that for us, and creating this exploitive, sick environment. Here's some money, make sure you do it again. So you got people in these corporate sectors, you got these people working in governments, total psychos, psychotic people. They're having kids, slave labor there, using kids for creating products, and then they're like, we're giving them jobs. It's like, yeah, you're exploiting them, really. You're creating jobs, you're not giving them living conditions, and you're just taking opportunities away from here for people to get good paying jobs because you don't want to use our money in ways that actually improves our economy as a whole. You just want to use our money for your own benefits. So when people say the problem is the government, it's not the government that's the problem. It's the people in the government. We need government structure. We need people who are going to do things like maintaining roads and infrastructure and constructing buildings and stuff. We can't all do all those things. We need people who are going to take care of those things while we do our own thing. You know, there are people who are much better at those things, who are proficient at those things, who have a lot of experience. And we need some people to organize and figure that out, to make sure things run smoothly. So we absolutely need government structure. We don't need exploitive workers there. So I never agree with this idea that governments are the issue. It's just people elected there are the problem. People who are working there are the problem. But yeah, just going back to, you know, where all that goes, right? So like all that money, instead of going into schools to make them better, they're going to these sectors, they're going into these endeavors, you know, and they're making sure that people aren't educated so that they will work for terrible wages. They won't know the worth of their time and life and energy and all that stuff. And I think here in the States, people are more aware of that and more, they grasp that better, which is why corporations hate to create businesses domestically, because they're like, oh, what you want us to actually pay you what your time is worth, what your efforts are worth? No, we're gonna go across, like, you know, send it across the seas and have it done for pennies. We're gonna have some like 7-year-olds sit there and create your Nikes sneakers for like pennies, and then we're going to sell it for $700 here. So again, just examples of how toxic and systematic all this stuff is, and how disgusting capitalism is. It is the entire cause of economical collapse and economic disparity. You know, there's absolutely nothing positive about it, except for the people who are sociopathic enough to like get into that. And it requires you to be. You have to just not care about anything other than money. And that on its own already makes you a really repulsive person to be around. You know, what's the difference between a mass murderer and somebody who thinks that way? You know, one is doing it directly, another one is doing it indirectly. Are we appalled by the direct or indirect action, or are we appalled by the result that it's killing somebody, it's murdering people for something so temporary and fleeting? You know, nothing is really worth it unless that person is trying to kill you. You know, that's another topic, but just for these reasons, it's absolutely insane. So if we're going to have justice systems, if we're going to have outrage, if we're going to have emotions about things based on morality, well, here's this problem that's very immoral. You know, it's something that we have to, and we have to change, because it's time and time again. This isn't new. This has been going on for generations. You know, this sort of approach has been going on since, I'm going to say, since the establishment of Americas here as well, you know, during the American Revolution. It was the same sort of tactics, the same sort of approach towards economy and people, and how to distribute money and how to develop education. They didn't want any of that. So we have to flip the script. We have to switch things up by actually demanding change. You know, and the way you do it is by having direct action, by protesting. I think that's the only way to do it. And by protesting, I don't mean, just going out there and doing it one day, yelling and screaming, and then going home and not worrying about it, because that's been done. It's doing it the way it's done in Iran. 2 months they've been going at it. People are out on the streets, they're holding up signs, they're demanding things, they're chanting, they're gathering together, and they're doing it consistently and consecutively over and over and over again, to a point where the government is like absolutely tired. And that's exactly what we have to do. We have to get them to that point. We have to shut down all of their profits, their abilities to do all those things, and have them recognize like it's the people who are creating their profits. It's the people who are giving them their lavishing lifestyles. It's not them. And we have to make that message loud and clear. We have to do that in order for things to start shifting in the right direction. We have to get those people out who are exploiting our taxes and favoring all these like sociopathic corporations. Otherwise, things are just going to get worse. The more complacent people are, the more they're going to be like, well, we could push this even further. We could just continue and see how much more we could skim off the top. Well, ladies and gents, that's my rant. That's my political rant. If you guys enjoy this content, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. There's more to come. There's a lot for me to talk about. I'm always going to be interested in this. I always feel like it's important to keep it at the forefront, for us to stay educated and stay aware of how we're being exploited, and stay aware of who is trying to make your future worse. This isn't the last time. It's not the first or the last time that I'll be discussing it. I'll be talking about it more in the future. Remember, this week there's going to be a special intro coming up, and other news and other topics. This Wednesday there's going to be a special intro. It's not going to be Gil Elfgren. It's not going to be a continuation of that. That's next week. This week it's going to be new. So check back in with the Art Lounge Alley to see what that is, what this new content is going to be this Wednesday. And I will see you guys tomorrow, same time and place, for more Art Lounge Alley. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. I'll see you soon.